It's episode number 4 for Creativity and Robots. My guest today is Kate Cook, a highly experienced marketing and communications professional with a strong focus on leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to enhance marketing performance and customer experience. Today, we're going to be covering several topics, among them how to introduce AI in an organization, the end of the internet as we know it, the Ryan Gosling Chrome extension, and why it's time for an AI reality check. One of the cool things about Kate is that she marries creativity and data in a way that not many creatives do. So she still can talk about it in a way that it's easy to understand. Let's go ahead and let's go into the episode. There probably isn't any better guest than you right now, because through 20 years of career, I see that basically your North Star has been driving growth and innovation for multiple platforms, right? How you got started with all of this? Because I saw you were doing like production and some creative work. And in which moment you were like, I'm actually interested about technology and I want that to play a bigger role in my career?
Yeah, I'm actually at a crossroads in my career right now. I think I've had 20 years of experience working for creative agencies, advertising agencies, working in-house on marketing teams, brands, entertainment companies, sort of running the gamut. And when I lost my job in April, I had an epiphany. It was just a moment where I realized this is the time when I can actually learn foundationally about AI technology, which is something that has interested me for 6+ years, but I never really dove into. So I actually immediately enrolled in a course to study machine learning with Caltech out here in California, professional certification course. And in the last several months have started my own business, a consultancy helping media companies and marketers incorporate AI into their businesses.
Like, what's the name of the business? What's the mission?
Era 7 Partners is the name of the business. And the reason why it's called that is because there have been 6 eras of human history: prehistory, ancient history, medieval, classical, modern, early modern, and modern. And we're now in the 7th. So the hypothesis is this is maybe the era of AI, the synthetic era, whatever you want to call it. Each of those eras has been marked by a real technological change that happens and completely reworks society over time. And I think that's where we are now with the introduction of AI. And so I'm your partner to help you navigate it.
That's a very compelling description. Thank you so much for sharing. And definitely, I think then we're talking to the right person, because as it turns out, we do want to discuss Gen AI, And part of this podcast is actually focusing on the human. I actually started like a year ago doing this as a newsletter. And it started, like, these are the 10 prompts that will help you streamline your workflow, and it's all like rainbows and shiny unicorns. And a year later, I find myself talking to people being like, are we running towards the end of civilization? So I do want to focus on the positive aspects, and there's plenty, but I think we need to be having these conversations, right? And that's why basically I started Creativity and Robots and talk to people like you so we can all sort of figure out where we're going and find out how right or how wrong we were 5 years from now. Going back a little bit more about, into that creativity and that start of your career, because you work so much for agencies, what do you think distinguishes great creative agencies from the rest?
I think it's having vision. I really do. I think that is having a North Star for the way that you want brands to live in the world and walking your brands toward that. And I think for me, I've always been on the strategy side. So, I create content, but for the most part, career-wise, I've been a strategist. I'm the one that does the research and writes the brief and sort of briefs the various parts of a campaign so that it all comes together. And that's sort of where the North Star begins. And I like that we're using that word a lot, is really positioning to resonate with culture, to resonate with a moment. And I think that agencies who can achieve that are the ones who will win.
And one of the things as a strategist, besides doing the brief, I'm sure you need to like transmit a vision of where's this North Star you're going to,
Let's
and get your team on board. And I think that might not be as hard, to be honest, once you do this a couple of years. Obviously, it is hard, right? But I think something that is harder is selling leadership.
I have been told, be nicer to the creative director. When what I was telling him was, hey, you need to put the show title and the CTA at the top because the bottom part of this out-of-home placement will be covered by cars. Now, that's just one example, but it's one example where I was doing my job, and the nuance of communication that you have to communicate to creatives who have a vision is something that is learned. And after that experience very early in my career, I have spent many years perfecting that communication style. And to be honest with you, some people sometimes are just not open to hearing critique from somebody who looks like me. And you roll with it, and that's the reality of the world sometimes.
Yeah, in my case, obviously the way I look, if I don't open my mouth, I'm good. But the minute I start speaking, sometimes I'll see the eyes, and you're like, oh, shit, here it goes. So it's always interesting. I didn't realize that until I moved to the US. Before, I never experienced that. So it's.
But I will say that, at least from where I sit, people with diverse backgrounds generally have something new to contribute to a conversation, whether it's a different perspective from, where you've been throughout your life, whether it's a new way of positioning a product or service, or a new way of thinking about the consumer, or a new idea of how you can reach a consumer. Those are all things that if you do it the way that it's always been done, you're never going to evolve, you're never going to grow. And having diversity within an organization is so important to be able to innovate the way that you do things so that you can grow with time. And I really fundamentally believe that.
Do you see a parallel between like organizations that embrace this diversity, beyond the Instagram post, as I say, beyond the picture that they get from a stock bank? Do you see them as being usually more open to innovation, such as, for example, implementing Gen AI?
I don't think that it has anything to do with the corporate communication strategy. I often think that when diversity is something that they focus too much time talking about, and maybe isn't something that is a core tenet to what they believe. But I do think that it takes all types to begin to open the door to AI into an organization. I tend to see that there's certain individuals who are passionate about AI, curious about AI, doing research on the side, experimenting with tools. They tend to raise their hands in an organization and say, I will commit to being the person that will help usher in this new era here. And it's usually something that they do on top of their day job, right? You're starting to see people or companies offering AI roles now. Chief AI officer is one that's starting to come about. A lot of recruiters are looking for people who have this technological background or experience to bring into a company. But really, for the most part, it's people who volunteer and say, I'm passionate about this and I want to help.
Is that how? Because I remember, April last year, you said, okay, I went back to school to learn about Gen AI. And you've been kind of tinkering with it for 6 years, which again, I mean, most folks that are related to creativity that I've spoken to, it's sort of like in the last few years. To be honest, my first encounter with AI was in 2020 during the pandemic. This SEO genius that I worked with in the past, Evgeny Petrov, and hopefully I'll have him here once because he's insane in the best of ways, was showing me this website that could write blogs. And I remember this was 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I looked at it and I was like, I'm glad it's horrible, because the minute this works out, we're done. And here we are talking about that. So how did you first get exposed to AI 6 years ago?
I've always been interested. It's not new. It's been the first chatbot, Eliza, I believe, is from 1966. you know,
Grammarly.
Grammarly has been around, right? And nobody says, I use AI because I use Grammarly. I mean, it's in your phone. It organizes your pictures and your contacts without you even knowing it. And so it's been around. And I think, I was experimenting with some of the first chatbots, training them, talking to them, enjoying sort of that flow of conversation and the fact that that can happen. That was around, I don't know, 2011, 12, 13. But I think for me, what happened in the last year and a half with the emergence of ChatGPT and becoming a household name and creating this web interface where people can actually interact with a really powerful LLM from their desktop, and then pretty quickly thereafter from their phone. That opened up a whole world where people suddenly realized this technology is on the stage. So for me as a marketer, I know consumer brands, I know retail, and I deeply, deeply know the entertainment space. I wanted to understand this technology to the same degree, right? I can tell you how a TV show is made from beginning to end. I wanted to have that depth of understanding about machine learning, about AI tools, so that I could then bring that level of expertise and marry it with my media background.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you were talking about on your LinkedIn that caught my eye was this report from the Boston Consulting Group. For those of you watching the video, I'll probably put some B-roll. Basically, it was talking about the slow adoption of Gen AI in companies. So as someone that, again, you've been doing this in multiple platforms, right? From TV to digital, growth strategy, building communities. So what do you see as the main barriers for organizations to be wary of bringing Gen AI?
Well, that's an easy one. It's legal. I think because if you think about large language models, they're sort of both ends of the scenario where you can have a legal problem, right? The first, and for me, the scariest is, do you have the right safeguards into the technology so that the prompts that you put into an LLM do not then train the model and potentially are able to get resurfaced to another user at a later date? And so, it's something that I work on with companies, really educating their workforce about what you can and cannot drop into ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, right? Confidential consumer data, financials, right? These are things, and the New York Times is in the middle of a lawsuit right now where they were able to prompt ChatGPT to serve them articles that were behind their paywall because the bot had been trained on that material. So that's one thing to think about. The other thing to think about, or that the lawyers think about, is how does my content then live in the world? If I prompt a bot to create something, who has ownership over it, right? The legal system doesn't really have a good answer to that yet because this technology is so novel. Will I potentially be sued by an artist who sees a fragment of something they've created into something that the bot has created because it's been trained on their work? That whole legal conundrum around who owns it and how it's created and what the pieces are within it and what their origins are is still very murky. And if I know lawyers, the one thing they don't like is murky. So I think for most organizations, it's really kind of figuring out, okay, well, let's not say full stop, we're not going to use these technologies. Let's work to find the technologies that have the right safeguards, the right data gating, right, that they can actually incorporate those into their workflow without fear of data leaking out.
Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting thing, right? Because I notice, at least I do a lot more work with startups, right? I work with some big corporations, but within, let's say, this new golden era of AI, most of my work has been with startups, right? And obviously there you either have folks that are very cautious or those that will set everything on fire and, we'll figure it out, which is, sometimes it's fun. I won't lie, but, it can backfire. But in the case, we're talking big corporations. And as you said, legal is very reticent to anything that might rock the boat. I've experienced it myself working maybe for social companies, and a avatar or like a username that I created had to run through legal, and legal took 3 weeks. But your project delivery was supposed, or the feedback milestone, whatever, was supposed to have earlier than that. And you had to make those work. So do you find yourself doing a lot of that dance between the legal needs, the business needs, a happy client?
No, I choose to sidestep it, right? Because I come in as an expert and I'm providing my expertise to point them towards solutions that are safe from a legal standpoint. So if a case needs to be made about why, sure, I'll make that case. But I think the thing that people are coming to understand is that ChatGPT is not what AI is. ChatGPT is sort of one way to interact with an LLM online, and that GPT is a foundational model upon which many, many, many softwares are built to do various specific tasks. And those softwares are pretty safe to use in a lot of cases if they come from a reputable company and they are able to clearly articulate their compliance, right? And all of that is sort of boring stuff that creatives don't care too much about, but that's the work for me to do to reassure them all of this is going to be okay to use. I think for creative agencies, for creatives, the pitch phase, the ideation phase, right? Coming up with concepts, putting storyboards together, everything before it goes commercial, all of that, every Gen AI tool in the world, you can use it. If you are, concerned about it, you can recreate it by hand and then you own it and it's yours. So as long as you don't incorporate any of those design elements or any of those video elements into your final product, you're safe, right? So there's a whole portion of the creative process where AI is completely safe to use, and most agencies that I know of are currently using it in those ways. Brainstorming, copywriting, test videos, storyboarding, all of that stuff, even a client presentation to bring to them to show them this is our idea, to really bring it to life and sell it in a way that they couldn't before.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you're bringing this up, about folks, again, as AI goes mainstream, and for example, I find myself talking to my mother about ChatGPT, and this is someone with whom I'm still, in her mind, I still work in customer service fixing computers because I do something with the internet. Nevertheless, we found ourselves, discussing AI, and I actually made it a bit of a project. I'm gonna turn him into a LinkedIn influencer. She's a college teacher, right? Like literature. So I'm kind of doing an education for her and taking it as my own personal project. But where I'm going with this, because you probably don't care about my mom, and neither do people listening to this
I care about your mom.
I know you do, okay? I know you do, but you know how people are mean sometimes. But one of the things that, again, in previous conversations we've had, you sort of like put these like 4 hats that I think are super useful for organizations to understand, which is like, AI can be repetitive, data-centric, predictive, and generative tasks, right? And I would like you to explain just a little bit about that for folks to understand what do you mean when we're talking about these 4, would you call them buckets?
I call them buckets. Buckets works for me.
Sweet.
Or
buckets it is.
Capabilities, right? Because really at the end of the day, if you're creative, right? Or if you're a strategist, the thing that is most powerful about your brain versus an artificial brain is that you can have ideas, is that you can tap into the culture that's around you and create connections that are resonant for people, is that you can strategize and plan ahead and play chess, right? And well, I guess chess isn't a good example because robots can do that, but really sort of that world of ideas, of creativity, that's where we excel. I'll wager right now, I don't think they're going to be better than us at that, at least in the next 25 to 50 years, right? And so those are the things that we need to maintain. I would never recommend that anyone have ChatGPT come up with the idea for their campaign or come up with the strategy to reach their audience. What these bots are really good at is the work that bores people. I talked to a partner of mine earlier today I was asking him, what's the use case where you think that your technology is best used? And he said, if your designer's bored, then you should use it, because it's a technology that takes a hero creative and outputs 100 versions of it, different sizes, different CTAs, right? Different copy. And so I think that repetitive bucket, that's such an important one to think about. If you're dropping information into a spreadsheet, push it off to a bot. If you're taking copious notes and then retyping them into your CRM, give a bot that work. I think strategically taking that first very easy layer of productivity gains out from under your people and freeing up their time for more creative, strategic, and ideas work, decision-making work, that's the easiest thing to do. Data-centric's the second one. I mean, you can look at a bunch of data, which I've done in my past, a spreadsheet with 11 tabs, all full of, CTA, click-through rates, and, how many audience members did this reach and what were their demographics? And I can try to extrapolate, some learning, some insights. A bot's going to do that better than I can, because they can read and find patterns much more quickly than I can. And so I think really sort of applying AI technology to that very granular data work that takes up both data scientists' time and just sort of research people's time at a lot of organizations, that's an easy fix as well. When you get into predictive and generative, the models get a lot more complex. But I do think that, from that data extrapolation perspective, one thing that AI can do is put together scenarios for you. If I invest $5 million and go into these 6 markets, what's my ROI going to be? Okay, if I invest $10 million but cut down to 3 markets, what's my ROI going to be? Being able to iteratively run scenarios like that, to be able to pick the right budget range, the right target audience, the right creative that you want to put out into the world, those are ways in which we can use these tools to help inform the decisions that we end up making, and come from a more informed place. And I'll lastly say about that, I feel that in the world of marketing, everything's been getting so much more data centric over the past 5 to 10 years than it ever was before. When I first started out, media was bought in big chunks. Creative was, sort of put out en masse instead of very highly specialized, highly targeted platform specific creatives. And I think as things get more granular and more data centric, we're going to need the bots more than ever before. So creating ways to bring that technology into an organization is kind of a must have, not a nice to have at this point.
Yeah. And how do we get to marry creatives with data? Because in your case, or in my case, we're folks, I know you're a big fan of Microsoft Excel. Is a rumor going on. I'm a Google spreadsheet person. I know they're probably getting all my data, but if for my own projects, I'm good sometimes for tracking my expenses. But most creatives, I think you'll agree with me, you say data or numbers.
I know.
And you automatically see them like running away. They're still there, but you lost them. How do we bridge that gap? How do we motivate them? Do we need to?
No, this is a great question, because there are definitely ways to do this. And I think that AI can really bring much better, more nuanced insights that are in English, right? Or whatever language you speak, to really help inspire the creative process. I'll give you an example. In the brief writing process, so Kate's sitting here, she's writing her brief. Without my AI tool, I say, okay, the audience is 64% female, age 25 to 54, lives in major metropolitan cities, reads magazines, and loves dogs, right? Let's say those are the 5 things that I've used my market research analysis to pinpoint for me. And I know that that's the target that I'm going after. Enter AI, where you suddenly have tools that can run deep emotional and sentiment analysis against where a target audience has been on the internet, what content they've watched, how they've commented on social media. There are numerous tools and many more coming out by the day that can give you a really nuanced picture of who that person is that you're trying to reach, what emotional context or emotional landscape they're going to respond to, and what content, marketing content that you have that's going to fit into that landscape and resonate best with them. And then on the back end, how do you go out and find them, right? How do you connect a user with a platform where that sentiment is there on both ends? So I think in terms of a creative reading a brief, if you're able to say, this person is motivated by these emotions, this person cares about these things, this person watches this kind of content because it gives them this kind of feeling, though that's really creative territory to build on, that AI is creating that capability for us as strategists to hand over to creatives to say, here you go, you can make something a lot more effective and a lot more beautiful with this.
Mm-hmm. And as a strategist, how do you kind of like trust us outputs, right? Because one of the things we've been finding out as AI, again, goes mainstream and everybody talks about it, is that sometimes, let's say ChatGPT, which is the best known tool, can sound very convincing and still, which again, I've seen people do the same in the marketing industry. So it's, in a way you say, oh, it's adapted to the industry, but it's not necessarily giving you anything accurate. So as a strategist, do you have any safeguards, without giving away the secret sauce, but any safeguards for you to be like, okay, I'm good with this data. I know that it's going to be okay. Even though it's like, I don't know, volumes and volumes of data.
Mm-hmm.
How can you know?
Well, first of all, you always have to have a human in the loop. That's what they call it, right? There's no such thing as an end-to-end process where research is done, brief is submitted, creative is created, creative is delivered, metrics are gathered, that doesn't have humans all the way along that chain, checking and ensuring that it meets their goals and their strategy. The other thing I'll say, though, is that no, ChatGPT is not very good at that. It's known for hallucinating. It's not what you should use it for, right? But with ChatGPT as the engine behind a off-the-shelf software or something that you have built or that I have built for you and your company with a specific training against your data and specific training against the types of questions that you want and the types of questions that you want answered, hallucination drops by a significant amount. And so I think that, there really is, again, a really big difference between ChatGPT, this foundational model that's trained on the entire internet that everybody's using all the time for any which way purpose, and a custom technology that fits into your organization that's trained on the things that you need it to do.
So training data from where, it's always been important, right? But it's becoming more important than ever, if I'm hearing that correctly. And I have a theory, which is, in a way, this is sort of, and I don't know if you agree or not, let me know. But it's like, it's obviously changing the way we consume the internet, right? A year ago, we could go on Twitter and read a tweet, read the responses. And it seems to me that in the last few months, everything's going behind some sort of paywall or some registration process, and data is just not as accessible anymore. Have you noticed this? Do you have any thoughts? You don't care?
I don't know that I've personally noticed that, but I think this is opening up the can of worms around how is AI going to radically change the internet, which goes into some territory here, but I think you and I both agree, yes, it will. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. Number one is so much of the backbone of the internet is built on Google search. And the more that you have, and the revenue of the Alphabet company at large, right?
Uh-huh.
And the more that you have questions being answered by bots who have scraped the net and formulated responses and listed sources, the less clicks that you have direct to publisher. So to me, that's a big clue as to how the entire infrastructure of the internet and the way that it works and functions and is built today could collapse the more and more that this muscle memory becomes part of people's lives of, oh, I'm not going to just Google that and then go into a click hole and click a bunch of links and then forget what I was looking for and then finally go back to it. But they're going to open Perplexity, for example, ask a question, get an answer, double check that it's right and done. And they haven't even clicked on any links. So I think in terms of advertising, I think in terms of publishers, content publishers, and the search engines themselves, it's tricky. I'm not sure what it's going to look like in another couple of years. I really don't.
Now that we're talking, about this content, how we consume it, and how, in a way, yeah, it's crazy. Now you're going to Google and without clicking, you're already getting information source from someone else's work. And obviously that person more than likely won't get, their fair share, which is a whole discussion itself. And probably we should do like a roundtable for this one.
Oh, that'd be fun.
Yeah. And I might once, you only have so many topics to talk about. So then we'll just start like taking different angles. But we're done with the last bucket, which is maybe the controversial one, the star of the show, the one that in a way it's very tied to how we consume content, and that's the generative aspect, right? And it's the one where I have kind of like, I work in content creation, right? That's what I started. That's my bread and butter. Then obviously you expand after you gain seniority, but at the end of the day, I was born a content creator. So again, content creation, I think it's kind of like such as the same way that in a band, everybody's going to be judging the singer because we can all talk, but no one can hear the bass player. It's the same here, right? Like, folks, I think generative is the one that has the most, at least the visible impact. Then as we we start understanding more, we see that everything, it's important, right? But for the everyday folk, most companies even, generative, it's like what they're thinking about when we're talking about AI. And what I'm trying to get to is that with generative, we kind of go back to all these issues of ownership, who's owning the training data. And I imagine that when we need to talk to a big company and the legal team, that's going to be quite the conversation, right? Because you'll find those folks are like, it's just AI, which again, most companies will tell you, no, we're not using it, we're keeping it legal. But who's looking 24/7, right? And we know companies are ethical and would never do that. But how do we bring that conversation, right? And I'm not telling someone, no, generative AI is what you need to do. But actually, as someone that is an advocate for generative AI, how do you say, like, hold on, because we're a bit of in a Wild West situation right now. Do you find yourself doing that? You don't care? Like, how does it work for you in your conversations?
There are generative tools that are pretty enterprise safe. So if you're talking about a Midjourney, no, probably not.
Yeah. Adobe's, I think it's a safe one.
Adobe's safer because it's trained on licensed data. So you can be sure that all of the content that was used to train that model was not stolen from anybody. It was already licensed to begin with. And I believe that Adobe pays creators. I know for a fact that Getty does, and Getty was a little bit slower to launch their generative product, but that's because they really took time to build the workflow and the payment process so they could pay all of their creators when creative was generated using their platform. So they're a very safe one as well. So I think, really it's about highlighting the differences between Midjourney, not enterprise safe, Getty, pretty enterprise safe. Find somewhere in the middle where you feel comfortable. I think companies aside, though, what I love about this revolution in creative technology is that anybody can create something using generative AI. using prompts, using the creative, using a dream that they had the night before and making it real, using a tool like, I hope, Sora, which, if it's as good as it looks to be, will radically change people's ability to make things. And for me, that creator culture sort of becoming more open to more and more people is a good thing. And I think the people who work at companies will be playing with those tools in their personal lives. So you need to match what people are doing on their personal time with an enterprise safe version so they can transfer those skills that they're learning on their own into their company and innovate further. That, I think, is the value chain. And as long as I can help companies make that happen, or at least take steps toward it, then they're keeping their employees happy because they're offering training, they're offering access to the tools they want to be using. But they're also preparing themselves for the future and beginning to learn the skills of prompting and beginning to learn how to leverage technology and opening the field for their people to begin to come up with new ideas or figure out how to apply it in a new way. So I think it's all good as long as you have clarity around what your policy is, what you're willing to accept, right? And then understand which technologies can help you get there in a way that's safe for your company.
So what I'm hearing from all that you're saying is that, in a way, generative AI, what it's, especially, again, for folks in positions of leadership or being the AI advocate in a company, in a way, the skill you are going to have to develop the most, which is probably the one AI can do sort of convincingly, but also not, is this soft skill, right? Because I imagine you're going to be talking to employees. They're going to have fear. You're going to have the advocate that wants to go crazy. You know, you're going to find everything. And I think it's the same with leadership. You're going to find the ones that are like, let's go on TikTok and do a viral dance, kind of, you know, the shiny toy. Let's just run behind whatever is new. And you're going to find the ones that it's, no, I'm already still struggling with people working from home. So how do you develop those soft skills? What's your advice for Kate from 15 years ago regarding these skills to develop?
I mean, my advice is just start. And you don't have to solve the world tomorrow. Pilot something, right? And I think that once you accept that, it actually has a whole number of higher order benefits in an organization that you didn't necessarily think about before. So one is retention, right? People, if they feel like their company is marching toward the future, they're going to be excited to come to work every day. If they feel like they're getting skills and training in the tools that are going to help them keep their careers in the future, they're going to be happy to go to work every day. Another one is optics, right? So you have your leadership teams in rooms talking to their peers on panels, on podcasts like this one. What are the optics around how they're positioning themselves for the future? Shareholders are listening to that, right? I mean, if you look at the NVIDIA stock and the way that it, has grown in the last couple of months, people are really paying attention and investing smartly with their money. So if you have a plan to automate and to leverage AI technology to really grow your business in a new way, it's only going to help benefit you in the long run. I mean, there's so many, different, and people who want to raise their hand and say, I'm the AI person, that's going to look great on your resume, right? And the contacts that you make throughout that process are going to be valuable contacts for your future. So all of these things are this world of secondary benefits of adopting AI into your company that can't be measured by a percentage productivity gain, can't be measured against necessarily a benchmark for your industry, but they can be measured in the long run, and they really are powerful tools.
And the thing, that I take from this, which again, I know it's a thing you talk a lot about, because while you're super driven, into learning more about technology and to implementing, and you're one of the people that when you start like looking for folks that are involved in content, media, AI, your name's going to pop up eventually, right? So one thing that you do, which to me, I like it because obviously whenever I hear someone saying like AI will change everything, you don't learn this, it'll destroy your life, no one will love you anymore. I'm like, snakes, all, like, are they selling me a course on crypto and like how to get my first Lambo? But you, on the other hand, you keep talking about the importance of human ideas and human creativity, which as someone that makes a living doing that, I'm like, thank you, Kate. But I try to kind of like put my corporate or like disruptor hat on. And like, how do we sell this value of humans' ideas and creativity to the people that ultimately have the buying power to hire you as an employee, as a consultant, as an agency? Why do humans, and we kind of touch on that, right? Like review, etc. But like, why human creativity or ideas are still relevant? AI can do it cheaper.
I don't believe that it can. I don't believe that you can prompt ChatGPT to come up with something novel. And here's why. Because fundamentally, ChatGPT or any of these LLMs, they look backward. The way that they work is that you ask them a prompt, and then using calculus, they calculate what is the most relevant response, the most likely response that they can give you based on everything that they know from the past. And so that's just the way that they're built. So I see them remixing a lot of old ideas. I see them eager to give a response that makes sense and is relevant, but I don't see them today coming up with anything that blows my mind. And so, no, that has to be done by a person, because the way that the human brain works is different than the way that the artificial brain works. And we have dreams, and we have relationships, and we understand smell, and we understand touch. And we can make those things manifest in a piece of content to wake someone up or to give them an emotional response, right? That could be learned, but at the end of the day, it's not what they excel at. And I really strongly believe that humans will always have to be creating content that is the good content. Now, that's not to say that bots aren't creating a whole lot of junk right now that is in your inbox, that is on the internet when you're surfing the net. I mean, it is everywhere, but it's not good, and it doesn't make you sit up and pay attention. And at the end of the day, there is something to be said for a volume of content, but content that is effective is what works the best, and people are going to be behind that content.
And with this content pollution, because yes, what you say makes total sense, right? But like, is there any way? And again, personally, I'm asking you a question for who, I don't have the answer to this. Like, I'll be super honest with you. I do not know. I have a theory, but it's like, how can this human-made, kind of like human-source ethical content? I don't know if we'll end up with like a seal, kind of like chocolate or coffee that says 95% of this content is human. But like, how do we surface over this probably incoming wave of mass-scale produced content that sort of sounds like it makes sense, but in a way, yeah, it's just a copy of a copy of a copy?
What's your idea? I want to hear your idea, because I don't think I have a good answer.
I mean, my idea, which again, many times I'm like, yeah, that might be wishful thinking, but I do think that, us humans, while we love folks making decisions for us, as story has shown, eventually there's always one decision that takes it too far, and we rebel. We are rebels by nature. We love being told what to do until we don't. So I do think that the same way, and I see it in editing in YouTube, we've gone from this retention editing, think Mr. Beast, right? Like every 10 seconds we show you something different because we need you, to people be like, this is overwhelming. And now you're seeing a renaissance of just one guy talking on camera and three cuts. And that's the kind of edit that we'll see in 2024. And in a way, I do see that we're going to hit kind of like that uncanny valley, or what I'm calling is the VRU effect. You know, when you call your phone company for customer service, you get a robot and you got like, just give me with a human. I want to talk to a human. We'll sort of experience that frustration that something is, you know, in theory, it is there, but it's quite not right. And I think we'll try to differentiate by being super raw. For example, folks writing with typos. I find it myself. I don't really, you know, my knee-jerk reaction to ChatGPT is, especially as someone that is not a native speaker, right? I rely a lot on Grammarly for my grammar sentence, you know, and obviously, as I've been using it for years, it's gotten better. But at the end of the day, now I'm like, I just want to do it my way. I don't care what you say. I want to sound like myself. So grammar mistakes and all, you know, and I see it with this guy on LinkedIn that was posting handwritten notes, taking a picture of his hand, showing that it's a hand, that it's wearing different clothes every day. So you don't think it's AI generated. And that's people funny. Are losing their mind, you know. So I think as humans, we can be petty sometimes in a beautiful way. And that pettiness is the one that will kind of like take us into a, you know, kind of like a pendulum. We're going to go to all sterile to us raw and imperfect. Then again, I might be wrong about everything. Like, I don't know.
I don't think you're wrong, but I'm just, because I'm a solutions oriented consultant, I'm sitting here with my wheels turning, thinking about how do we make that happen, you know, and I would love an ad blocker for AI generated content, right? And ad blockers are so easy to install as a plugin in Chrome. I used to have a plugin like that changed every ad space on the internet to Ryan Gosling's face. Right. And it was like a joke app, but it was funny. But I think the main problem is that the field of AI generated content detection is not where it needs to be right now. It is very hard to detect. And all that I've read about fingerprinting, it's just, you can peel it off too easily. I think that from an industry standards perspective, I do think that we need a better either fingerprinting or detection capability so that people can have the choice to block it out if they want to. That to me would be the way to do it. So maybe we want to start that company and make millions of dollars that way.
I'm on it. Let me just prompt ChatGPT, see if it can come up with any ideas.
I do want to talk a little bit about the disappointment dip that we're in right now with AI technology advances, which is that if you spend all your time reading about it on the internet or chatting about it on social media or talking to your friends about it over a glass of wine, thinking, what's your P-doom? How long until the bots take over the world and kill us all? You're probably going to think that AI technology is way further advanced today than it currently is. And I think part of what I navigate on a daily basis is two things. One, explaining that there is no track that a campaign, for example, can go on where every stage is automated. You really have to build that track piece by piece with a lot of solutions that are out there. And a lot of times they do one specific thing really well, but you have this dream that it's going to do more, and it currently is not there. I keep getting scooped by new solutions that come out all the time. And talking with partners who I work on to do builds, custom builds for clients. This is something that keeps happening where we find a use case, we stand up a technology, it's pretty quick. They start using it. And then all of a sudden, Google launches something that does it, right? Or it gets built into one of these larger technologies as a feature that suddenly is there. And I think there's just an understanding that we have to have that the pace of innovation is so rapid that everybody in the tech industry is focused pretty narrowly on getting their AI capabilities to be at the top, and they keep one-upping each other over and over every week. It's impossible to keep up with. And that what that means is that what works today will still work tomorrow, but it may not be the solution that I would recommend tomorrow. And so how do you manage those shifting sands? I think, really being clear and transparent, and trying to find the best solution that can work today, and keeping an eye on the future and working your strategy with the future in mind so that you can take advantage of everything that's coming, hopefully down the line. So those two things are they complicate the process, but that's the reason why you need consultants like myself and like a few others who are working in the media and marketing space.
And I'm so glad you're saying this, Kate, because the next thing I want to know is where can people find out more about you, your career, and how you can help them through the use of AI and creativity?
Follow me on LinkedIn. I post quite a bit on there. And I do some product rundowns where I share, the features and the specialties of a bunch of different solutions in a given area to help people decision make on their end. My website is www.era7partners.com. And you can follow me there too.
Awesome. So this will be added to the show notes if you're listening to the audio podcast, to the YouTube video. If you're watching it, I think TikTok now, it's going to pay for folks to do long form. So if that's the case, we'll be there too. So we'll find the notes on TikTok, but definitely we'll be adding all the links so you can follow Kate on LinkedIn. You should absolutely do so. Because one of the things I appreciate about you is I have which is someone that has had to do a lot with that as someone, again, I started to say YouTuber. I think YouTuber 2014, you said that and people already wanted to punch you. So I'm kind of used to what I do having a bad reputation, right? So it's good that there's people like you talking about AI in a way that it's realistic, that it's business driven, because at the end of the day, we all got bills to pay. So, we can be super romantic about like the art and the value, but that's unfortunately not the world we live on. So I really appreciate you that you bring a no BS vision. You talk about the good, but you also talk about the challenges. So folks, follow Kate. It's worth it, I promise. Kate, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I have so many other questions. So again, will beg you to come back at another time. Well, maybe we'll do a round table on ethics, because while you have answered a lot, I have so many more questions. So you'll definitely have to be back here. No pressure, as I usually say.
Thank you for having me. It's a great conversation. Thanks.
All right. So for the rest of you, if you're listening to the podcast, a review is always helpful. So go ahead, click whatever stars you feel the show merits. And if you're on YouTube, leave a comment, leave a like. That always helps. If you want, subscribe. But if not, it'll show it on your feed anyway. So just like it. It's easier. That's it. Thank you all for listening to this episode, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.